Good evening, and welcome to this community meeting where we will discuss the Long Bay Beef Island Beach Management Plan. But before I do so, I would like to recognize the Premier and 7th District Representative, Dr. the Honorable Natalia Wheatley, Minister for Natural Resources and Labor, Honorable Melvin Turnbull, Minister for Health and Social Development and 8th District Representative, Honorable Marlon Penn, members of the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for joining us tonight. This particular exchange with you builds on an earlier set of community meetings and public meetings related to the same Long Bay Beach Management Plan, which was presented during the month of April. And at that time, the ministry promised to return to you with a new amended plan, which built on not only the input provided at that time, but also the results of a survey conducted during the month of April. So therefore, tonight's presentation, which will be made by Ms. Angela Burnett Penn, will look at the elements of your feedback in addition to technical review. Before starting in earnest, I would like to invite the Assistant Secretary in the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor, Ms. Linda Varlek, to render prayer.
Thank you very much, P.S. Smith-Abbott, and good evening. Join me in a word of prayer. Let's adopt a prayerful and reverent attitude. Our gracious Heavenly Father, we call you Abba, Father, but we also know you as our Creator, Creator of the earth and of all the fullness therein and all the beauty that is around us. We thank you, Father in heaven, for this opportunity to meet, to discuss, to share, to learn, and to consider what is in the very best interest of this special place that you have created that we call Long Bay Beef Island. We invite you to be here with us and to reign over our proceedings this evening, and to us even your wisdom and your grace. Share with us a due sense of the stewardship that is necessary for the proper administration of this special place. And Father in heaven, also please open our hearts, our minds, our spirits, that as we commune one with another this evening, it is done decently and in order and in accordance, not just with your will, but in celebration of you, who are the God of all that is decent and orderly. I ask, Father, that you would bless all of our leadership that is here among us, and as well as our guests tonight, our technical colleagues. I ask also that you would even bless the very equipment, Lord, and the technology that we are using, that it will be able to proceed uninhibited and very smoothly, and we would have a really good meeting, Lord, and that the outcomes of which would be most pleasing to you and in the very best interest of this beautiful territory, the Virgin Islands that we call home. We ask these and all of the things that are good and right in your estimation and in your name. Pray in the name of the matchless name above all else, Jesus Christ, our Lord and our Savior. Have your way, O Lord, is my prayer. Amen.
Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Ms. Varlek. And at this time, I would like to invite the Premier, Dr. the Honorable Natalia Wheatley, to render his statement. Premier.
Thank you, P.S. Smith-Abbott, and I acknowledge the Minister for Natural Resources and Labor and representative of the 2nd District, Honorable Melvin Turnbull. I acknowledge my other cabinet colleague, the Minister for Health and Social Development, and the representative for the 8th District, Honorable Marlon Penn. And I acknowledge the entire team, along with yourself, P.S. Smith-Abbott, from Natural Resources and Labor. And let me thank you for an opportunity. And also let me certainly acknowledge the director of the Tourist Board, Mr. Clive Mccoy. Let me thank you for the opportunity to participate in this meeting. Long Bay is very special to me and very special to the people of the 7th District and the 8th District, as well as the entire island, as this is one of the most popular beaches, if not the most popular beach in the entire Virgin Islands. God has blessed us with a beautiful environment, a beautiful piece of God's earth we've been gifted with. And this beach has given us wonderful childhood memories. It's given us the opportunity to interact with our family and friends. It's given us the opportunity to have recreation and to have exercise. It has also given us the opportunity to build our economy by, of course, inviting persons who are visitors and residents to engage in commerce. And as has been said before in the prayer that opened, it's important that we are good stewards of this beautiful piece of God's earth that we have been gifted with, which has given us so much in our lives here in the Virgin Islands. And I'm grateful for the work which has been done from the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor. I was very happy. And I also want to certainly single out a member of our community and an esteemed member of the public service, Miss Angela Burnett Penn, for the presentation she has made on the beach management plan for Long Bay Beach, and also for the type of engagement that the ministry has had with the community, ensuring that the community is a part of what's taken place as we seek to become better stewards of our environment. We certainly know that the beach, Long Bay, was opened up after Hurricanes Irma and the situation we faced in places like King Garden Bay. I know the member for the 2nd District and the Minister for Natural Resources and Labor would remember even painfully the situation that led to King Garden Bay not being accessible after the hurricanes. And of course, many of our cruise passengers diverted at that time to Long Bay Beach. And this has provided us an opportunity to diversify our tourism product and to spread our passengers to different places, not just Long Bay, Beef Island. There are other areas that we'd want to spread them to so the tourist dollar can spread throughout the Virgin Islands. So certainly there have been business opportunities there. But it's very important that we have a plan that can manage some of the various interests that we have, because, of course, Angela has reminded us, and that's something that we know well, this Long Bay is one of the few beaches where local persons can go and be able to swim and be able to enjoy enjoy the water and enjoy the sand. And so it's important that we're able to manage the various interests, and to being able to do so through a beach management plan in keeping with the beach management policy, I would say is a wonderful step forward to us to ensure that we avoid any environmental degradation, that we avoid the challenges with an unmanaged beach in terms of litter, in terms of conflict between different entities on the beach. And I have been able to take a look at the beach management plan, and I believe it strikes a very good balance between the different interests on the beach and the need, first of all, to preserve the environment for coming generations, and which is something I believe that we can all celebrate. So again, I'm very happy to be a part of this consultation with the public. Very happy that the plan is being presented, and certainly look forward to the agreement of this plan and the implementation of this plan, and also to be able to move forward with other beaches on the island of Tortola, and as well as many other islands and keys that we have here in the Virgin Islands, so we can be good stewards of our environment and ensure that coming generations will have the benefit of all that we had the benefit of growing up. So thank you so much for the opportunity, and certainly look forward to a very good meeting.
Thank you, Honorable Premier. And I think you have highlighted the fact that Long Bay is indeed the pilot in terms of the process of creating management plans for not only this beach, but also other beaches, which will obviously balance both the protection and rational use of those resources. So thank you very much, Honorable Premier. And at this time, I would like to invite the Minister for Health and Social Development, who is also the district representative of the 8th, Honorable Marlon Penn, to render his remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Abbott, Chairman of this particular meeting this evening, Honorable Premier, Minister of Finance, my honorable colleague, Minister for Natural Resources and Labor, the Honorable Melvin Mitch Turnbull, senior public officers, persons listening live on Facebook, and residents who are tuned in as well. A pleasant good evening. I too would like to join in and thank the Ministry of Natural Resources first and foremost for honoring their promise to come back to the public with conceptual documents and drawings and a way forward for the development and management of this beach at Long Bay Beef Island. As the Premier so rightfully said, Beef Island Beach is very dear to my heart and to his heart as residents of that community who grew up in that community and knew the vital importance that beach has played in all our lives in the development in that community. We have a responsibility now as political leaders and district leaders to strike the right balance to preserve the beach for further generations to come, and not just for the current generation, but for future generations. And I believe that the work that was done has been done so far by the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor has struck that balance. Has put us in a position where we could have further conversation on the way forward. I want to thank the public and those persons who participated in the surveys, the engagement, the previous public meetings, for us to have a way forward. I believe that we're in a good place now to finally finalize the way forward for this development, but to move with haste to implement the protocols that are necessary to properly manage the beach, to ensure that we strike that right balance between the environment and economic development, and to be able to ensure that the beach is there for generations to come and preserve for all persons to enjoy. As I said, the beach is there to us in the Eastern Island community, but it's all of our beach, the entire Virgin Islands. It belongs to the entire Virgin Islands. We all have a responsibility to preserve the beach and to strike that balance that we continue to speak about in terms of the environment and economic development. So I'm here to listen first and foremost. I saw the plans. I am excited about the opportunities that we have for the beach, not just from economic points of view, but from the point of preservation and restoration in many areas of the beach. And that would create a level of preservation that we need for that environment and for that particular beach in the years to come. So again, I'll wait on the further discussion, but I want to first of all single out Miss Angela Burnett Penn and her team for the work they've done to get us to this point. I know it's going to take some additional discussion, some additional work to move to the next step, but I'm confident, based on the progress made so far, that we'll meet that right compromise between all the stakeholders involved to get us to the point where we have a functioning plan for implementation, for management of the beach and the environment and also to be able to preserve what we've been blessed with for generations to come. So again, I thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I look forward to the further discussions with the public and the wider community. We would have to move at some point to go to another consultation as well within the Rotown area, but we'll stay on as long as we can to field some of the conversation, the questions and concerns raised by members of the public. I thank you.
Thank you, Honorable Minister, for your remarks, which you've highlighted the importance of this particular beach, not only to the local community, to the two districts where most of the eastern Long Look community would have enjoyed that beach, but also highlighted the national significance and importance of this particular beach to many other Virgin Islanders. So certainly you've highlighted the need for us to exercise great care in the way that we go forward in planning and balancing the various interests. So thank you, Minister. At this time, I would like to invite the Honorable Minister for Natural Resources and Labor, Honorable Melvin Mitch Turnbull, to bring his statement and remarks.
Thank you very much, PS. Acknowledging the protocol that has been established, Honorable Premier, Dr. the Honorable Natalia Whitley, Minister of Finance and member for the 7th District, the Minister for Health and Social Development and member for the 8th District, Honorable Marlon Penn, to UPS Smith Abbott, to the entire team at the ministry, the hardworking team that I have the privilege of working with and being employed with at the Ministry of Natural Resources, to the general public and the listening audience here, the people of the British Virgin Islands of the 7th and 8th District. It is my pleasure to be able to join this team to present this plan after its initial consultation stages and your input to be able to present it back to you. I also want to take the time to acknowledge the remarks by the Premier and the member for Minister for Health on stating the importance of Long Bay Beef Island Beach. They know we have a tug of war because there is no beach like King Garden Bay Beach. I am the representative for the 2nd District. There's no beach like Bruce Bay Beach, and there's no beach like White Bay Just Van Dyke and Great Harbor Just Van Dyke. But there is no beaches like the beaches in the British Virgin Islands, which includes Long Bay Beef Island Beach. So I am happy for the team, the technical review team that has been working tirelessly, for the team and the technical support, even from GIS, to put on this meeting. But more so, I'm excited about to hear from the public what their thoughts are about what has been put together based on the input, based on the studies that we have done. God has gifted us with these beaches. Yes, it is part of a tourism product, but if we do not preserve, if we do not protect, and if we do not plan ahead for how we're going to continue to maintain our beaches and our natural resources, then it will be our loss. So I am glad that there are persons within this ministry and in this team who have taken the liberty and made this the pilot project for how we plan to address beaches, how we plan to address how persons and the noise pollutions and the pollution on the beach and the use, and how we keep it safe for not just this generation, not just for tourists, but for those of us who call this BVI, who call this territory home and enjoy it. So we have a job to do. I believe my team in the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor are committed. They have shown their dedication and commitment. All the persons have been a part of the committee from all areas and all walks of the government service. I want to thank them. I am not going to speak any longer. I just want to say thank you to everyone. I look forward to the comments. I thank you to the Honorable Premier for facilitating this process and also making the necessary funding available to be able to implement this project coming up in 2023, because it will do a great wonder to protect and preserve and promote Long Bay Beef Island, but it also do a great job to help our overall environment and nation building and protecting the environment as we deal with climate change and the effects thereof, to ensure that we are doing everything possible to ensure that the education of our people, the education of our children, to how we treat our beaches and our natural resources. Because without the environment, there could be no schools, there could be no building, there could be no infrastructure. So with this team, I am deliciously proud of them and the work that they have undertaken, and I look forward to the input and the involvement from the community. As Honorable Penn said, we are going to be multitasking between another meeting that we have to give consultancy on, but I am going to be engaged and involved. And when you need me, my camera may not be on, but I will be listening intently to be doing so. But I am turning you over to the able and capable hands of Miss Angela Burnett, the PS Smith Abbott, and the entire team. So thank you guys very much, and I look forward to this discussion.
Thank you, Honorable Minister. And certainly you have highlighted the place of Long Bay amongst many other beaches of equal beauty and importance. And also you've highlighted the need for resources to be brought to bear on the implementation of this particular plan, which certainly will be highlighted at some point, especially during the evening, during the presentation. So a lot of work has indeed been done within the ministry, and recognizing the leadership of members of the team, which I should do very shortly. But before doing that, I'd like to invite Mr. Clive Mccoy, the director of the BVI Tourist Board, who I also acknowledge his presence, to provide us with his remarks. Mr. Mccoy.
Well, good evening, everyone. I recognize the protocol that has been established. I would like to first start by saying that I'm so happy that the ministry responsible is taking the steps to pay attention to our beaches. In tourism, you often hear people saying that we have sun, sand, and sea just like everyone else. And while the sun is a given because of where we are on the earth, that sea and sand, if we don't preserve it, we can absolutely lose it. So this initiative is big. It is an initiative that will enable us to be at the forefront of tourism many, many, many years from now. If you don't believe that this is important, do your research. Look around the world. See what has happened when beaches have not been managed properly. I'm in tourism. I've been in tourism for a very long time, and I've seen what happens when beach management is not in place. Beaches close down. People aren't allowed to swim in the beaches. Beaches become overcrowded. It affects the tourism product in a major way when beach management is not in place. And with tourism being almost in an embryonic state right now in the BVI, we're still growing, we're still babies in this. This is the perfect time to put things in place to ensure that we have the best beaches in not just in the region, but in the world. And I would just like to give kudos to the ministry responsible for seeing the importance of this as we start to take tourism more seriously, because like I always say, tourism is everybody's business, and I consider it to be the top economic pillar within the British Virgin Islands. So to everyone that is out there listening on Facebook and other platforms, this is your opportunity to ask questions. Be inquisitive. No question is dumb. No question is not right. Ask questions, because at the end of the day, when this plan is put in place, we all will have to answer to it. And again, I am so proud to be here to see the presentation. I've went through some of the documents. It is looking really good. Kudos to Ms. Angela Burnett Penn for spearheading this effort, and all the leaders that have put their strength behind this. So let's have a wonderful conversation about the future of beaches in the British Virgin Islands, and so we can protect our sea and sand for future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McCoy, Director of the BVI Tourist Board. And what is really stark and remarkable about the statement that he would have rendered at this particular time is the importance and centrality of the planning process in ensuring that beaches have sustainability and longevity, and that indeed it takes energy and effort to ensure that the beauty that we enjoy today is sustained and provides opportunities for economic development within the context of tourism. So I thank you very much. So with these words, I recognize the leadership and importance in this whole planning process of Ms. Angela Burnett Penn, who is an environment officer with climate change, responsibility over climate change, but also who has been a driving force in the development of this particular plan. And she would have presented early in the year, as I made mention at the beginning of this particular exchange, this meeting, and she will yet again do so. Once she has made that presentation, the rest of the meeting will be moderated by the Deputy Secretary, Mr. Mervyn Hastings, who will be moderating both questions live on WebEx as well as those that are posted on the Facebook page, government's Facebook page. So we will be monitoring both feeds and be mindful to respond to those questions that you may post in either of these particular meetings. So with that, I would like to invite Ms. Angela Burnett Penn to present the plan to all of us.
Thank you very much, PS, and a very pleasant good evening to everyone. Let me just first thank the Honorable Premier, our Minister for Natural Resources and Labour, representative of the 8th, and Minister of Health, along with Mr. Mccoy, for the supportive remarks given, and UPS for setting the context. Just give me a moment while I share the screen. We have prepared a PowerPoint presentation to take you through the plan. Okay, can you just confirm to me, PS, that persons are able to see the screen in presentation mode, please?
Yes, we are definitely seeing it. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to try to minimize these controls. Okay, well, it's certainly a pleasure to be back with the public again, now that we're at the stage of a draft detailed plan for Long Bay Beef Island, to present to you the plan and to hear any feedback at this stage. I will have to move fairly quickly through the presentation in order to cover all of the main points that we would like to receive feedback on. But please be assured that at the end of the presentation, there will be ample time for questions and answers and for any clarifications. So if we need to go back to any particular slides and the details of that, there will be opportunity to do so. Before I get into the specifics of the plan, I just want to address quickly why the need for a plan in the first instance. So significantly, Long Bay is one of the very few remaining whole intact beach systems. And by that, I mean we have the full gamut of marine and coastal systems, everything from fringing coral reefs on either side of the bay that are supported by the pristine water quality of the bay, and salt ponds that actually help to maintain that water quality. So it's one of those systems that is really special and needs to be protected to make sure that it can continue to benefit us in this current generation and generations to come. In addition to its environmental significance, it's also a very important social, recreational, cultural, and spiritual area. As has already been mentioned, this is true for the entire Virgin Islands community, and in particular, members in the Eastern Long Loop community. I'm sure everybody has enjoyed one of the various values represented on the slide right now. And in addition, I just want to highlight, and this comes with the backing of many scientific studies, the significant role that natural spaces and beaches in particular play in terms of preserving mental health and wellness. So these spaces are actually important from a health perspective, quality of life perspective as well. And Long Bay, based on data that we've collected, is likely the third most visited beach in the territory, but I would argue that from a residential perspective, it perhaps even tops the list. It's a very important area for our daily lives. But we've seen that in recent years, the environment and nature of activities at Long Bay have changed quite dramatically. There are a number of new activities that have been introduced, in particular since Hurricane Irma in 2017. So we've seen much heavier visitation by cruise ship passengers. We've seen now the establishment of permanent commercial activity with a presence currently of 7 vendors, and that includes, in addition to bar and restaurant operations and souvenir vending, it also includes beach chair rental, commercial water sports, And then we've also seen some shifts in the local or residential use of that beach with a much heavier presence of parties with loudspeakers close to the seashore, which has actually created a noise pollution issue. Essentially every Saturday and Sunday now, it's a loud environment at the beach. We've also seen a significant increase in barbecuing and outdoor cooking at the beach and much more regular anchoring by yachts. These are just some images for those of you who have not been to the beach very recently, to give you an impression of the current types of activity at the beach, including some of the, my slides are slipping, including some of the local or residential uses and some of the obvious visual impacts that those are having, including some safety concerns. So all of those changes and new activities has really shifted Long Bay from what was a very low threat beach to one of the beaches with the highest threat levels in the territory, where currently the beach experiences 11 out of the 17 potential threats to beaches identified in the Virgin Islands beach policy, which was approved in the last few years, and it's at risk for another 3 threats. And these threats range everything from excessive littering of the beach to significant destruction of the vegetation, which is critical to maintaining the health of the beach, and things like multiple and conflicting uses of the beach by users. I just want to highlight in particular the significant loss to the vegetation that we've seen by comparing the 2002 aerial of the beach to 2020. You can see for yourself that we've basically almost lost the sea-grape tree line at the front edge of the dune, and we've lost a significant part of the vegetation comprising the eastern dune system. And the sand dune system is critical, like I said, for the long-term sustainability of the beach. It serves as an important reservoir of sand, an important habitat, including for turtle nesting activity. As a part of our planning process, we did a public survey to understand and take a pulse of the public satisfaction with circumstances at the beach, what they would like to see changed and how, as well as their vision for the long-term development of Long Bay. We had a total of 300 respondents, and I'm pleased to say that we had a pretty good representation in terms of age range and in terms of persons responding from across Tortola, across the territory, but having the highest level of response as might be expected from the 8th District and the 7th District. And significantly, I think the persons who responded to this survey are really vested in Long Bay. A total of 92% of respondents indicated that Long Bay is either important or very important to them. And what those respondents are saying is that as a result of the recent changes at the beach, their overall use and enjoyment of the beach has reduced. So 51% of respondents said that they enjoy the beach less as a result of those changes, and 48% that say that they use the beach less often. And I think one thing we can all agree on is that that is not the direction of change that we want to see at the beach. As a part of the survey, we captured very detailed data in terms of what people are satisfied with, what things people are fairly neutral about. So this is where they might neither be satisfied or dissatisfied, and points of dissatisfaction, where people say that they are either totally unsatisfied or unsatisfied. And I want to spend a bit of time here because these really represent the pain points that the beach management plan seeks to address. So in terms of the environment itself, persons are very concerned about the level of litter. They want to see a much cleaner beach. They're concerned about the lack of shade trees and overall vegetation, concerned about the noise level, and loud music in particular was flagged here. They want to see more or enhanced amenities and facilities. So for instance, lifeguard presence on the beach, better waste facilities, picnic tables, enhanced restroom facilities, and enhanced access road. And in terms of commercial activities, the activity that really flagged here as a concern is the beach chair rental activity. So you'll see how the plan, as I go through, seeks to try to address these pain points. So the purpose of the plan is simple. It's to urgently address the existing threats to the beach, to restore and maintain user satisfaction, and to create the enabling environment to realize the vision for the beach, which we have derived based on the public consultations that we've had, based on the survey data, and based on a thorough assessment of the historic or traditional use of the beach. And that is part of what we're consulting on tonight, the vision that we're proposing for the beach. We've gone through a stepwise process to get to where we're at now and to get to the final approved plan. As was said before, we started with a conceptual plan that was presented for consultation in March. We're now at the stage of a detailed plan that has all of the components treated. We're going through a final round of public consultation, after which we will be finalizing the plan. I do want to indicate at this stage that while the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labour has led on this plan, in addition to consulting with the public, we have also consulted with a number of agencies across government that have a stake in management of beaches. So agencies like the Tourist Board, for instance, Ports Authority, and several others that comprise the ministry's technical review committee. So this is a plan that has taken into consideration many perspectives. The plan has multiple layers or components, and I will be trying to summarize each of those components in the presentation this evening. The vision for the beach that we propose is a beach we can all be proud of, where protection of the natural environment is prioritized and where local recreational, spiritual, cultural, economic, and tourism needs are carefully balanced. Along with defining a vision for the beach, we've tried to define an identity for the beach and a character for the beach that should be preserved with the implementation of the plan. So in respect of the identity, we're proposing that Long Bay remain primarily for recreational use and enjoyment by all residents, while accommodating tourism and commercial activity at a sustainable level. So what this means in practice is that traditional uses need to be supported, and that includes protecting Long Bay as a swimming beach. As was highlighted before, this is actually the only remaining beach attached to Tortola that is safe for swimming year-round because it is in a protected space from swells in the winter months. It also means that activities of one user group, including tourists, don't unduly impact or displace use of others, including residential use. And that part of that is ensuring that tourist use is limited to sustainable densities and activities. In respect of the character, we want to make sure that the natural aesthetic of the beach is maintained, and in that in part means ensuring that any development blends into the natural landscape and does not dominate the beachscape or does not compromise the environment. We did take a view of a person's preference in terms of the long-term development at Long Bay as a part of the survey. And the clear finding here is that the majority of the public, 95%, do not think or do not want to see a situation where Long Bay is commercially developed as a major tourist destination. Rather, there's a slight majority, 52%, that feel that some commercial development should be allowed. However, this should be limited and carefully planned to preserve the environment, maintain a natural aesthetic, and balance tourist and residential use of the beach. Importantly, we see that there's still a substantial segment of the population as well, I think combined about 42%, that feel that there should be no commercial activity at all, with about a quarter of the population thinking that development should be limited to basic public amenities like restrooms, with commercial activities just being during special events, and about a fifth of the population feeling that the beach should be entirely preserved in its natural state. We are, of course, past that point. We're now at the point where there is already some commercial development. So the duty of the ministry really is now to make sure that that is carefully balanced and considers the fact that there's still a large segment of the public that would like to see a very natural landscape maintained. So I'll move quickly into the spatial plan and the key points here. We're all very familiar with the location of Long Bay, but I want to highlight the land use context, in particular that the majority of the land surrounding the beach falls within Parcel 40, which is actually Crown property. It was acquired from private holders some years ago but via a cabinet decision for around $5.5 million. And I want to highlight that the basis of that acquisition was actually protection of the environment. I should also point out that there's a small sliver, the first segment of the main access road to the beach, that is still within private ownership. We're all very familiar with the fact that there are two motorable accesses to the beach, one that goes through that parcel 40 adjacent to the salt pond, and one that goes through the private estate of Little Mountain. And this leads to 3 entrances to the beach or to the seashore, your western, central, and eastern entrance. So I'll take you first from a wide bird's eye view of the beach, and we'll drill down into more detail. Essentially, we're proposing that the recreational and commercial activity be focused here on the eastern dune of the beach. In keeping with the vision that Long Bay remains a beach that is safe for swimming, and swimming is prioritized as the activity, we're proposing a passive water sports zone that is sufficiently set back from the seashore to allow that to continue. We're also proposing the introduction of a new recreational feature in the form of a bird watching hiking trail that would meander along the salt pond and lead to a lookout deck that actually offers panoramic views of the eastern and southern keys. So I'll drill down now into the eastern dune so you can appreciate the details of the plan. We are prioritizing along the entire dune front or seashore the reestablishment of that sea grape tree line. And that is one of the areas of the plan that is absolutely uncompromisable. It's important to maintain the beach, not just 5 years from now, but 10, 50, 100 years from now, many generations from now. We'll also be making sure that we're restoring the eastern dune system, the vegetation there. So another key element of the plan is placing what we're calling a dune protective system, which is essentially a system of wooden posts that would prevent vehicles from accessing the space, allowing the dune to recover with some active restoration effort as well. So in replace of persons being able to park in this space, we're creating structured parking, which would be unpaved screened areas. There will be a central parking lot, and there will be an eastern parking lot as well. I would highlight now that we're facilitating recreational use by the creation of a picnic space that runs linearly alongside the sea grape tree line and falling within the shade of the sea grape tree line. And as a part of the picnic zone, we're proposing 2 purpose-built barbecue pits to help facilitate that barbecue and outdoor cooking activity in a safer, more environmentally friendly manner. From the commercial and tourism perspective, we're creating a hub for that activity that is deliberately offset from the main or central access to the beach and the eastern access so that we maintain that natural aesthetic. Persons coming to the beach will meet a natural landscape and can decide whether or not they want to engage in this commercial space or not. So you can just put yourselves now in the shoes of a tourist coming to the beach. You would come and park or be deposited here at the taxi parking lot. And this becomes your main entranceway to the beach as a tourist. It would take you directly to the vending zone, which is highlighted in red. So persons can patronize those businesses, including the bars and restaurants. If they've gotten something to eat, they can sit and enjoy their meal or their drink in this outdoor eating area, which directly connects to the zone. And then there are pathways that take persons out onto the seashore, where we've also included the beach chair zone. So that's the overall appreciation of the plan. You'll also note that there are some red dots on this end, and these represent some small facilities that will be available to support water sport operators. And this section of the beach will be designated as the launch area for the passive water sports zone, which I explained before. So this is a 3D rendering of what that space would look like. And I'll take you even further now into the vending zone. To just have you appreciate, we'll have a combination of small vending units and medium-sized vending units. And the vending zone will be adjacent to what we're calling the admin units, which is there to help support the management of the beach and the user or visitor experience. This is, again, a 3D appreciation of that space. So I'll give you some more details on each of those features now. This is just a visual representation of what that beach dune protection barrier may look like. The picnic area will essentially consist of a series of standard picnic tables shaded by the sea grape tree line. We're looking at a total of 25 picnic tables, adequately spaced. The birdwatching hiking trail will have a natural path supported by tree logs as necessary, and we're proposing to strategically place rest benches along the hiking trail. The lookout deck will be open air, 12 by 12 structure with a maximum capacity of about 20 persons. The vending zone will accommodate a total of 6 units in the mixture that I showed you a few moments ago. I want to highlight the fact that there's a boardwalk leading along the front edge of the zone to help best transition, and that each unit will have a handicap access ramp. The small units are about 10 by 10, and these are open air, meant to be very flexible to accommodate a variety of different types of vending operators. And the medium-sized units are slightly bigger at 16 by 16. And these are really meant to service bar/restaurant type operations. And I should say these are the dimensions exclusive of the deck space, which is also part of the vending space. Like I said before, the zone directly connects out to the outdoor eating area with the boardwalk serving as a transition. And at the rear of the vending zone, we're including a boardwalk and a lay-by to facilitate servicing or provisioning of those units. The small units, like I said, have a very open floor plan. So this is just a closer look at that with a 4-foot deck. The medium units are open at the front, which is intended to serve as the bar/food service area, and more enclosed at the back, which is intended to be the kitchen space. We're also proposing a space dedicated for barbecuing or outdoor cooking. And I should just point out here that these units will be built as shells with electricity and plumbing connections, but it would be up to the lessee to determine the specific internal layout. So these are just meant to be samples for illustrative purposes, including to demonstrate the fact that all of the necessary kitchen equipment can fit within the space as we have spec'd it. These are some impressions of the outdoor eating area. So I should probably just highlight here, it would be essentially a series of circular picnic tables with attached benches and umbrellas, in addition to additional shade provided by trees in the zone. The administrative unit is a small 10 by 10 space, and we'll have a male and female restroom included in that. And that would be designated for the staff connected with beach management, as well as for use by staff of the vending zone. The beach share zone, I'll go through the internal details shortly, but I just want to highlight here that we are proposing that there be storage facilities as well to ensure that the beach chairs, when taken off of the beach, as they should be after immediate use, can be properly stored. Parking facilities, the central parking lot, we're looking at a total of 74 spaces. On the eastern lot, 10 spaces, so that's 84 spaces combined for public parking, and the taxi parking lot has a capacity of 14 spaces. We are proposing a variety of waste management systems or bins, all of which will be screened, including making sure that the picnic zone has a system of 3 bins, to be able to accommodate recycling as a part of our waste management strategy. So I'll move quickly now into the Environmental Restoration and Protection Plan. And I should highlight here the fact that Long Bay for some time now has been proposed as a national/marine park. In fact, this was embedded at the time of that cabinet decision to purchase this property for purposes of protecting the space. And that triggered the process to declare this area as a national park. And that process is well advanced. I do want to highlight that the objectives of a national or marine park are such that they do not in any way contradict the plan that we're proposing, but would in fact help to support best implementation of such a plan and to help best manage the visitor experience. The Environmental Restoration and Protection Plan treats every element of the environment at the beach, and for each we define a restoration or protection goal, standards that need to be achieved, and also determine environmental management measures to ensure that those standards are being met, are being adhered to over time. I just want to highlight quickly what we intend for the vegetation line and the beach dune, the wider beach dune system. We're aiming to achieve 100% restoration of the vegetation line on the western dune. That's the area that's for the most part, relatively undisturbed, and 90% restoration on the eastern dune, where we will have the picnic zone included and where we want to make sure we have some wider view channels so that persons at the outdoor eating area or at the vending units can have straight views out to sea. So the primary species of focus will be the sea grape tree, but we're also looking at other keystone species like the beach morning glory and other species that provide habitat for birds, etc., like the barabasco, which bears a lovely berry. I just want to remind persons of what that historic sea grape tree line at Long Bay looked like. These images were actually taken the weekend before Hurricane Irma, so very dense, very healthy. In fact, we have a small remnant of that historic tree line, and we were able to determine that in about a 25-meter space, there would be about 5 clusters of sea grape trees, each consisting of 2 to 3 trees. And this is the density that we intend to restore that line to. In terms of a wider beach dune system, we're looking at 100% restoration on the western dune, 75% restoration on the eastern dune in consideration of the footprint of the vending zone and other activities there. And we'll be focusing on a number of species. I've just highlighted 3 here, including the lignum vitae, loblolly, and marble tree. So finally, I'm going to turn to the management measures and rules for the beach, as well as giving you a quick view of our implementation plan. There are a number of measures that are actually built into the spatial plan itself. So for instance, if we look at the beach dune barrier system, by virtue of this excluding vehicles from this dune system, not only will it protect the environment, but it will do a lot to inherently reduce the noise pollution at the beach, as well as to reduce the level of waste that is generated at the beach. But we're proposing additional measures to help deal with the noise pollution issue. And these are one of the points that we would hope to get some public feedback on tonight, seeing that noise pollution was one of the major concerns expressed in the survey. So you'll see this later on, but anybody wanting to have events hosted at the beach actually needs to seek permission from the ministry. And so we're proposing that as a part of managing those events, the ministry preserve a certain percentage of Saturdays and Sundays in a given month as no event days. We're proposing 50% as sort of a neutral starting point, for discussion and feedback from the public. We're also proposing that we have no commercial entertainment event days. And this would be to really respect those most sacred traditional religious holidays like Good Friday, Easter Sunday, and Christmas, and proposing that there be a maximum of 2 events on any given day to make sure that there are no conflicts of use, and erecting signage so that persons are reminded of and aware of legal requirements and associated guidelines. So I'm speaking here, of course, to the Noise Control and Abatement Act, which essentially says that persons can use a loudspeaker so long as it is operated as to not give reasonable cause for annoyance to persons in the area in which the loudspeaker is being operated. And the Act does include a test of reasonableness, and part of that refers to established standards. So what we've sought to do is look to international standards that establish what is a safe noise limit, and what are noise limits that make sure that disturbance is not caused to people in different settings, including outdoor settings. And there are even some standards that have been developed specific to beaches. So we've looked at those standards and we'll be suggesting these as guidelines to help people sort of check themselves and be able to help others around them sort of self-police, and make sure that nobody is unduly disturbing other users of the beach. We've also sought to define a carrying capacity for Long Bay. Essentially, a carrying capacity is the idea that every space can only hold or accommodate so much use or so many people until before it becomes a problem, whether that's expressed by it having an environmental impact or by people feeling too crowded that they no longer enjoy the experience. So the committee looked at various international standards that are established for tourist use and for public use of beaches. And in respect of tourists, we're proposing the World Tourism Organization standard, as BVI is a tourist destination. And on the basis of that standard, we'll be looking in the context of Long Bay at a maximum of 450 tourists at the beach at a particular time. So there are typically 2 cycles of tourists going to the beach, one in the morning and in the afternoon, speaking in broad terms. So this would mean that over the course of a day, there could be 900 tourists accommodated at the beach. We're currently actually operating at a slightly lower level. Based on the data that we've collected, we're currently up to about 650 visitors at the beach on a good cruise ship day. So there is some wiggle room built into this standard. The ministry would suggest that we try to stick within the current limits, as BVI does market itself as a higher end tourist destination. So to give you a visual impression of what this would look like in terms of density, each person would have about a 10 square meter space, which is equivalent to about a 10 foot by 10 foot box. And if you were to think about a space of about 105 foot or a segment of about 105 foot on the beach, there would be 50 tourists packed into that space. On the weekends, in consideration of the fact that this is when the beach is in highest demand by residential use, and again, in keeping with that principle of making sure that tourist activity doesn't negatively impact or displace residential use, we're suggesting a slightly higher standard. So in this case, there's another international standard, the high standard public beach, which would equate to having 225 tourists at the beach at a time. And that's essentially about half the density. So now each tourist would have a 20 square meter space, or the equivalent of about a 14 foot by 14 foot box. And in that same segment of beach, you would now be packing 25 tourists in that space. In terms of beach chairs, there's been quite a bit of discussion by the committee on this. And we've decided to suggest maintaining the number of chairs operating at the existing, or capping it at the existing number, which is about 400 chairs. But we're also proposing some management measures, again, to make sure that that operation is not displacing residential use on weekends when the beach is in highest demand by residents, which I'll show you in a moment. But just to highlight that at that number, the beach chair zone does take up close to 600 feet, which is about 75% of the eastern side of the beach, about 60% of the beach width, and this would be beach chairs over three rows. This is a view of the internal layout of that, the details of which we can come back to as necessary, but it's a proposed spacing to make sure that the 400 chairs fit within that defined zone. In terms of commercial units, there could be a total of anywhere between 8 to 11 commercial operators within the spaces that I presented. 3 bars/restaurant operations, 2 water sport operators, and anywhere between 3 to 6 other vendors, depending on the specific leasing arrangements for those small units in particular, which could potentially be split in 2 based on the specific footprint required by some vendors, which in some cases might be quite limited. In terms of the public restrooms, we're proposing that we keep it at the current capacity, which is 8 stalls. So what we've done is an analysis of the service rate of the restrooms to determine how tourist arrivals would have to be staggered in order to not have that facility overwhelmed. So based on the current capacity of 450 persons at a time, we've calculated that we would have to stagger arrivals slightly over about a 1.5 hour window to make sure that the capacity is respected. And this is on the assumption that about 50% of persons arriving at the beach would want to use the restroom within a half an hour of arrival. So now to the share the beach policy, which is an important aspect of what we're proposing here, sharing the beach between residents and tourists. So essentially, we have a great opportunity, I think, to share the beach on a time scale. So from Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, when the average person is out working and not using the beach would be fully open to taxi tour buses within the capacity limits just discussed. But on the weekends, on Saturdays and Sundays, when the beach is in highest demand by the resident population, we're proposing that there be some restriction on not tourists going to the beach per se. So we're not saying that tourists cannot go to the beach, but on tourists arriving in mass numbers via taxi tour buses. So these are the 3 options that we want to present to the public this evening and later this week for feedback, for consultation. Option 1 being that the beach is closed to taxi tour buses on weekends. Option 2 being that it is open on a Saturday but closed on a Sunday, and this could be potentially the flip way around. And option 3 being that the beach is open on both Saturdays and Sundays, but up until a cutoff point, 1 p.m. here suggested, as the beach tends to be more heavily used by residents in the afternoon. And then finally, on the share the beach policy, there's the aspect of the beach chairs, which again came up as one of the pain points in the survey. So we're suggesting, in lieu of reducing the number of chairs on the beach, that we manage that by having no rentals on the weekends, so that that significant footprint that could be potentially taken up by beach chairs is fully available for the public's use. We did do an analysis of cruise ship passenger arrivals over the course of a full year, using 2023 as an example year, so we could appreciate what the economic impact of such a policy would be. And the data is here presented on the screen. Essentially, they're very limited arrivals on Saturdays and Sundays, and they vary over the course of the year, with some months having no arrivals. But on average, the total arrivals on weekends is 10% of all cruise ship passengers' arrivals. So basically, the economic impact to operators would be very minimal, and certainly not an impact that would be detrimental to business. And I should also highlight here that all of the beach chair operators also engage in other vending activity that would be open on the weekends. So just very quickly on the rules of the beach, just to highlight that there are 3 categories: prohibited activities. So for instance, in terms of land or beach dune alterations, persons cannot in any way cut or destroy vegetation on the beach. Then there are a set of activities that require permission. And I just want to highlight the first one on the list, which is that use of the beach for any commercial purpose or a non-commercial purpose involving groups larger than 50 persons, or use of a loudspeaker or open fire, does require permission from the ministry. This policy has existed for decades. I came into government meeting this policy in place, and it has now been formalized in the beach use policy for the Virgin Islands. And then there are some required actions. So these are actions that users of the beach, including commercial operators, are required to take. And using the beach chairs, again, as an example, beach chair operators would be required to immediately remove and store any beach chairs that are not in use. And again, this is actually embedded in the beach use policy. So final slide on the implementation plan. The Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor will immediately continue to manage the beach once this plan is implemented. And at such time that the process is completed for this area to become a national park, then the management would be transferred to the National Parks Trust. So the ministry will seek to achieve success through a combination of mechanisms, including things ranging from public education right down to enforcement of relevant legislation. We'll continue to make sure that application and approval mechanisms are in place for long-term vending, temporary commercial use of the beach, as well as non-commercial use of the beach. We'll be implementing a number of monitoring mechanisms. Some of these already exist and will be enhanced, making sure that we're looking at environmental monitoring, facilities monitoring, as well as monitoring adherence to rules. In terms of our implementation timeline, we're looking at implementing this plan over the course of a year, starting in about mid-January and ending by December of next year. So we're actively working now on making sure that the funding is secured within this budget cycle to support implementation. And finally, I just want to highlight that the full plan in all of its 100 and odd page glory is available for the public to read, to study at the URL that is listed here. So please, we're encouraging you to download it and review it. And you can provide written comments in addition to any comments provided this evening and at the public meeting on Thursday, which is going to be at the Eastern Methodist Church Hall at 6 p.m. You can provide written comments at this email address, which we will be monitoring. So I know I had to go very quickly, but we're happy at this point to entertain any questions, any points of clarification, and any comments. So I'm going to stop, and I'll keep the screen shared so that we can go to any slides as necessary. But I'm going to turn over to my colleague, Mr. Marvin Hastings, Deputy Permanent Secretary in Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor, who is going to moderate the discussion. So Mr. Hastings, I'll probably stop sharing just to allow you to share your video and maybe say a few words in advance of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Angela, for that wonderful presentation. Hope everyone can hear me clearly. I noticed that there might be a second or two delay between our link and the Facebook link. So I would want to let the general public know that we're trying to keep the questions and answers tonight specifically to the beach management plan that Ms. Angela Burnett Penn presented tonight. Certain issues such as who's getting vending spots, we don't know that as yet. So we're not going to entertain certain questions that we or the ministers don't have an answer to as yet. But as it comes to the beach management plan, as it comes to the carrying capacity, as it comes to the general layout of the beach, those are the kind of questions that we're trying to entertain and for the discussion tonight. So I'm here looking at our Facebook page and looking at the questions, and we are welcoming any questions from hence on. Myself, Angela, any other members in the team will be able to assist you in answering these questions tonight.
Thank you very much, Mr. Hastings. I'll go ahead and share the presentation on the screen again so that I can easily flip to any slides that persons might have a question on or comment on.
Thank you, Angela. I think the one that has the overall picture of the beach that shows the layout of the plan, it might be good to have that one up.
Agreed. I will flip to that.
I'm seeing that we have, if I'm right, that we have close to 30 viewing members of the community thus far. So does anyone have any question on the plan based on what was presented tonight by Ms. Burnett Penn and the ministry? That might be the best one, Angela, that spatial plan on the Eastern Dune. Okay, I do see a question that came in. So let me get to it. It says, is the beach policy in regards to the residents and tourist use specific to Long Bay, or is it to be implemented across all beaches in the territory? Well, Angela, you want me to tackle that, or do you want to go ahead?
No, sure. You can go ahead and feel free to respond.
Well, Angela might have mentioned in our introduction that we do have a beach management policy that was passed in cabinet in 2017, if I'm corrected. And under that beach policy, it mitigates and it says that we're supposed to have management plans for all the beaches in the territory. Because after Hurricane Irma, Long Bay became a very popular tourist destination for locals and tourists, we've decided to start that process and starting with Long Bay Beach Island. But we're expecting every beach within the Virgin Islands, Tortola, Virgin Gorda, Eels Van Dyke, to have specific management plans for all of those beaches. Every beach is going to be tailored differently. The beach management plan that we have here for Long Bay Beach Island obviously is going to be different than a King Garden Bay or a Josiah's Bay or a Brewers. But the intention is to have implementation of beach management plans across all the beaches in the Virgin Islands. And it's definitely in regards to residents and tourists.
Yeah. If I can just add to that response quickly, Mr. Hastings, I think persons should appreciate that we've tried to develop the plan for Long Bay in appreciation of the fact that we need to have a system of beaches functioning together to achieve all of the different needs for beach use within the territory. And what really drove the development of the plan for Long Bay is the natural environment, as I explained in the presentation, and how special and important it is and the need to protect it, but also the traditional use of the beach, the fact that this is perhaps the most popular beach for residential use attached to Tortola, and the fact that it is singularly the only beach that is safe for swimming year-round. So we really try to prioritize those things in our thinking about the plan. Now, of course, in thinking about a beach like Brandywine Bay, for example, where the dynamics there are entirely different, that plan would likely look very different and might allow for more sorts of things like motorized water sports, for instance. So I just want persons to be aware that we have taken into consideration how a set of beaches in the Virgin Islands might work together to fulfill all needs. So don't expect that every beach need or desired use would be met by Long Bay Beach Island alone. One beach can't be everything to all parties.
Exactly. I see Davies Miguel says kudos to the ministry. The plan is well thought out and considered to all stakeholders. Thank you, Miguel.
Yeah, thank you.
All right, I see Miguel again. Something that we have to bear in mind with the hours of usage. Some of our cruise guests are here from 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. and excursions have to be timed within those hours. Opening the beach at 9 a.m. on weekends will severely impact excursions offered by tour and taxi operators.
Mhm. Yes, okay, thank you. Thank you for that. The hours that we included were just based on some preliminary discussions with operators, but certainly as we go through, continuing to go through this process, now that we're having these meetings and get some appreciation of the feedback, we do intend to have further discussions with the operators. And so that's certainly one of the aspects of the plan that can be adjusted based on the feedback and further discussions that we have with operators. What would be an appropriate operating or opening time, to make sure that we are accommodating for guests who might be arriving early. But we would also have to balance that, of course, against the fact that there is a segment of the community. I certainly know within the Eastern Long Road community, there's a group of persons who religiously every morning use that beach in the morning time for exercise, spiritual renewal, etc. So we would also have to give consideration to the set of users that use the beach in those early hours of the morning as well.
Any other questions? Angela, I'll throw a question to you.
Sure.
I like to be within the same industry. I don't see in the plan that we have anything, now that we're making Long Bay, it is a tourist destination. I don't see any facilities for lifeguard or lifeguarding. Are we saying that we're gonna leave the beach in its current situation with no lifeguards, or is that something that the government is looking into or planning to?
Thank you for raising that question, Mr. Hastings. Persons might remember lifeguarding services actually featured on the list that people expressed concern about. So just to give a bit of history, and Mr. Hastings, I'm sure you can help to flesh this out. But Long Bay, in terms of a swimmer risk, is actually a very low risk beach because it's well sheltered by just the shape of the bay itself, Guana Island, Great and Little Camanas, so that you rarely have swells come into Long Bay. And so historically, it's not been prioritized as a beach for lifeguarding services in comparison to other beaches like Keene, Josias, for example, where you have a much higher risk environment. However, we appreciate that the context at Long Bay is now shifting, where we're moving from an environment of predominantly local residential use where people won't go into the water unless, they can swim. And, we've rarely had, I can't recall of any local incidents of drowning or death at the beach, although I know there have been some incidents where there was some cause for concern. But now that we're shifting into an environment where it's going to be a heavier usage by tourists, we do agree that there is need to now look at lifeguarding services. The reason that we haven't represented a lifeguard tower on the plan, although we have thought about the appropriate space for it, and we're going to leave that space open and available for that use, is because it's going to take much more than just simply constructing a tower to fulfill that need. So this is a conversation that we'll need to have with the fire services that is currently responsible for lifeguarding, because it would take an expansion of the current program to make sure that there's a warm body, an actual trained lifeguard who can be stationed at that beach. And there's, of course, a funding implication to that. So the plan basically supports the idea that this beach should have a lifeguard presence, but it's one of those things that would have to be done with the proper budgetary support, and there needs to be some more conversations to support that. So you may not see a tower immediately built, but it would be within our hope and intention to see that happen.
We have another question, Ms. Burnett. It says, and it's from Jana Call. I understand that the individuality of the management plan for each beach. However, I'm referring to the policy that is being worked on now. Can you go over that section once more, if possible?
Sure. So I think, I don't know if I necessarily have a slide on the Virgin Islands beach policy, but if I understand the question correctly, the Virgin Islands beach policy applies to all beaches within the Virgin Islands. Essentially, what the policy does is it sets out the management mechanism for all beaches. And a part of that is calling for each beach to have an individual management plan. But the policy itself does include some rules that apply to all beaches. So, for example, in the presentation, I talked about not cutting vegetation or not cutting trees. That's a rule embedded in the policy that applies to all beaches. I talked about the rule applying to beach chairs, that all beach chairs need to be immediately removed after usage and really only put out on demand. That's something that applies to all beaches. So there are a set of rules within that policy that apply across the board, and it sets out the procedures for application to use a beach, including for commercial use or non-commercial use. Those things all apply to all beaches. And like I said, that rule about applying for use of the beach has been a long-standing rule. Mr. Hastings, I don't know if you can give a timing on that, but I think that has been around for at least maybe 20 years or so, if not
Yes, it
longer.
has. And if I can add a little bit more, Mr. Carl, the policy is not being worked on. I think it was 2020. You gotta get
2020, I think so. It was
2020.
approved.
The beach use management policy was passed in cabinet. So we're not working on a beach management policy. That has been passed. Now that the beach management policy has passed, the policy calls for all beaches to have a management plan. So that's what I was referring to. Maybe Angela was referring to as well.
Yes,
Okay?
thank you very much, Mr. Hastings. That's an important clarification. So we're working on the basis, this management plan is on the basis of cabinet-approved policy.
Yes. All right. We have another question, Ms. Burnett, from Sue Sorrentino. It says, "Good evening. I feel that excursions by taxi drivers and tour operators should be restricted on weekends and left for residential use."
Okay, so maybe more of a comment. Is there a question element? So we'll note that feedback.
No, we'll note the feedback, and I'll go on to our next question or our next comment. It is very important for beach residents, and I think the impact from tourists should be minimum as possible. A view that was reflected in the survey that was not done. Okay. We have another question for Joanne Hill. She says, why is there time restrictions on the beach? There's no time restriction on other beaches. There's no... Angela, I'll let you answer that before I kick in.
Sure. I'm not sure if the person is suggesting time restriction for residential use, because that's not the intention at all. The beach is open at 24 hours to the public and to tourists as well. The time restrictions that we were referring to would be arrival of tourists via organized tour buses. And that really just relates to the fact that those people will be coming in mass and would therefore have a certain level of impact, contribute to a certain level of density of activity at the beach. Right. So it relates to that idea of carrying capacity. Absolutely no intention to restrict time of day that either tourists or residents can go to the beach.
And I also see that P.S. Smith Abbott just added to members of the public who's listening in, and on Facebook, he actually added the approved beach use policy. So you can quickly click on it and have a reading of that. Okay? I have another question, Angela. Let me look through and see while we're waiting for more comments and questions. Mine is this. I go on Beef Island sometimes, and I see members of the community, residents, whether or not they're... we have a good melting pot here in the Virgin Islands. I've seen the Grenadian community up there sometimes doing their oil down. I've seen Guyanese and them, and I've joined them and eating food and barbecuing. You said that there's a section there. I hope there's a section there for that. What do you do with that group of local residents that enjoy going to the beach every weekend, having a little cook-up in their areas, and that continuing on the weekend? How do you account for that sort of activity?
Right. So this is one of those, again, newer activities that has emerged really since this space, the Dune system, became open up, if I can put it that way, which started actually about maybe 2016 or so, right before the hurricane, and then was further opened up as a result of the destruction to the vegetation coming from the hurricane. But we've tried to facilitate that activity because we do recognize it's an important part of the enjoyment by some users, but making sure that that activity is now implemented in a way that it is not impacting the beach system. And currently, we have maybe in the region of 5 or 6, possibly even more, of these makeshift barbecue pits, outdoor cooking areas, just strewn throughout the beach dune system. It tends to be the source of a lot of litter and garbage, including broken bottles, which is a safety concern. We've observed, taken many pictures of instances where persons have their outdoor cooking, they leave the charcoal right there on the sand, which over time it's soiling the sand. So there's some impacts coming out of that activity. It's also a potential hazard in terms of potential fire. And the last thing we would want is a fire to start and destroy the vegetation in the dune system. So for all of those reasons, we thought it necessary to, while allowing and encouraging that activity to happen, to have it in a more controlled environment that is safe and isn't creating a disturbance for other users, including the smoke and odors that would come from that activity. So I'll just highlight it again on the map. There's just one symbol here because this map is symbolic as opposed to literal. But in this general space, we're proposing the creation of 2 purpose-built barbecue pits. I don't have a photo representation of one, but persons can feel free to look them up online. These are things that have been implemented successfully in a number of other destinations. Essentially, they're purpose-built outdoor cooking areas that would have the facilities necessary to support that activity. But again, done in a way that is controlled and wouldn't have those sort of impacts to the beach. You can see there's a waste facility located nearby to help to make sure that any waste generated from that activity, it's easy to dispose of, and persons are encouraged to basically do the right thing and keep the area clean.
Thank you. Let me go back to see if you have any further questions. I don't see any. Not currently.
And we do want to encourage people to ask questions, please. There's no, as I think Mccoy said, there's no such thing as a silly question, and we should
Exactly.
you should feel as a community safe to have a conversation about an area that is important to all of us. Different stakeholders have different interests, and everybody should feel safe in expressing what their interest is, their point of view, and we're happy to entertain all questions relevant to the conversation that we're having this evening. I just want to highlight the fact that we do take the public input seriously, and we actually have made modifications to this detailed plan based on feedback that we would have received from the first round of consultation, including the inclusion of this outdoor eating area, including the adjustment of the water sports zone area for that zone. So I just want to say that this is a process where public feedback is taken seriously, and somebody needs to be muted.
Sure. Yeah, someone.
GIS can control that, please.
I also see that Linda's hand is up. Linda, do you have a question?
Evening. Thank you for this great presentation and for all the questions. Just wanted to highlight a question was asked in the WebEx feed about new jobs.
I'm sorry. Thank you.
I don't know if you want to field that.
Sorry, I didn't actually hear the question. If you could repeat, please.
I'll repeat the question. My apologies for not checking the WebEx feed. The question that was asked in the WebEx feed is, how many new jobs can we expect this plan to generate?
So that's a good question. I can't give a precise number, but I can give some potential idea based on the number of vendors that the plan accommodates. So as I said in the presentation, we're looking at anywhere between 8 to 11 vendors. Part of what we will be considering in looking at persons who apply to use the beach over time would be the economic benefit of the business. And part of that, of course, is the number of jobs created. So I don't have the benefit of that specific data before me, but if I could make a reasonable estimation that each business might have at minimum 2 to 3 employees, then across 8 to a maximum of 11 vendors, you're looking at anywhere between 20-odd to 30-odd jobs just directly attached to those businesses. And then there are other potential commercial activities that could happen within this space. For example, you could think of tours along the Birdwatching Trail and others that might be some ancillary economic activity generated from this plan. I do want to highlight, while I'm remembering it, a feature of the plan that I forgot to mention, fairly minor but important feature, and that relates to the enhancement of the restroom facilities as well as a public access road, and those were two other concerns expressed in the survey. So we will be seeking to enhance the amenities of the restroom facility. So in particular, we're looking at adding shower stalls. There are currently some makeshift stalls that are at the beach, but actually formally adding those attached to the restroom facility, and other minor improvements like adding face mirrors. And in terms of the access road, we certainly wouldn't want to pave that road because it would create an environmental impact to the salt pond, to the mangrove system that's adjacent. But we do appreciate the need to keep that road more motorable. So basically looking at making sure that the road is more regularly maintained, more regularly graded. And I should say there's actually a bit of a challenge, might not be the right word, but remembering that part of that access way is privately owned, it does put some constraints in terms of what we can do for at least a certain segment of that roadway.
Okay, Angela, quickly, let me get to these few last questions before we try to wrap things up.
Sure.
A few of them came in. It says that, is there a plan for West End of the beach? Not seeing a diagram on the screen. That's one. The other one is from Linda Smith. I appreciate your analysis using international standards. Can you expound on any comparison of similar destinations which also market and caters to high-end visitors and guests relative to the beach management plan?
Okay, I'm going to address the first question, but I'm going to ask you to repeat the second question more slowly because I'm not sure I got all details of it when I'm through on the western side.
Okay.
So I'll just go to this wider view to answer the person's question. You can probably even see it a bit here, but the real recreational uses of the beach has historically been focused over on the Eastern Dune. We have seen recently persons starting to utilize the Western Dune in a similar fashion, and that might just be people reacting to the fact that this space has now become very crowded in some ways, very loud, and people trying to get away from that a bit. So it wasn't presented in the presentation tonight, but we do intend to include some minor facilities over here, including a few of those picnic tables that would be over in the picnic zone here. But we really don't intend for much beyond just a few picnic benches over on this side. And of course, you will see that the Birdwatching hiking trail that we are proposing actually loops around to this western end of the beach, and that's intended to give people an easy connection to this side of the beach. But this side of the beach has, perhaps because of the presence of the seaweed, not been as heavily used. You tend to see people gravitate to this side of the beach, maybe with younger children or more elderly persons, because it does tend to be the shallower end of the beach, and certainly the end of the beach that never ever experiences any sort of rough waters. And again, with keeping our focus on preserving the environment, we really want to limit our footprint of interference on the beach. And that's why we're just proposing some limited picnic tables on this side. There's also the fact that the public parcel ends at the border with this private road, and there's actually a small segment of the beach here that does border private property. So that has played into that decision a bit as well.
Okay, Angela, thank you. The question I'm going to read again, I'll read slower this time.
Sure.
It says, I appreciate your analysis using international standards. Can you expound on any comparisons of similar destinations which also markets and caters to high-end visitors and guests relative to beach management plan, relative to a beach management plan?
Okay, so the person asking the question can perhaps clarify, but I'm assuming Let me just get to the slide. I'm assuming that they're speaking about the standards, not that I spoke about for noise, but the standard related to carrying
Carrying
capacity.
capacity. I would assume that.
Right. So again, I don't know that I can give any specific examples of other destinations and the standards that they have adopted in their destination. However, again, I would just highlight that the standard that we're proposing is the World Tourism Organization standard. And again, this is an international standard. So this means that this would take into account the spectrum of destinations, everything from high-end destinations to mass tourism destinations, many of which are beach destinations. If I think, for example, of some of your destinations in the Mediterranean, for example, and this standard tries to cut across all of those types of destinations. And again, the standard is 10 square meters per person, and we're not at that level in BVI or generally speaking, or at Long Bay as yet. We're below that, and that's part of why we are suggesting, even though we're establishing the capacity, which should be your max at this level, that we actually keep it at a lower level in consideration of the fact that BVI really does market itself, sorry, I was at the wrong slide, as a higher end destination. And higher end means inherently lower densities, as opposed to a mass as opposed to a mass cruise or tourist destination. So if you think of the average as cutting across all of the spectrum of destinations, we would want to sort of really be a bit below that average.
Sure. Thank you.
Okay, I would say, sorry, I should probably say, Marvin, that maybe there's one example of where this standard is perhaps exceeded in BVI, and that might be the BATS, where there have really been issues there with excessive visitor numbers. And I think that's a good example of where we see too many numbers at a destination at a time, really deteriorating, not just the environment, but the visitor experience. And that's the tipping point that we don't want to cross.
True. Thank you for that. So we have another question from Janai Call. Aside from the few vending plots that is to be established within the plan, would there be consideration given to other crafters and salesperson not able to secure vending slots to set up sale under tents, out of a car, etc. in the free? I'm sorry, just jumped on me.
Sorry, I'm just trying to get back to the spatial plan. I'm listening. You can go ahead.
Okay. Would there be consideration given to other crafters and salespersons to set up slots and stuff on the trees, or is there an expansion plan in mind for vending development? And then he has a second question. Would someone be allowed to set up under a tree and sell craft or local snacks, for example?
Okay, so thank you for the question. This is one of the points that the committee did deliberate, whether or not that possibility should be allowed. And after careful consideration, the committee agrees that we should not, that the vending activity allowed at the beach, and this is in keeping with the vision that we're proposing and in keeping with maintaining the identity and character of the beach, that the vending activity, again, vending activity is meant to be in a sustainable footprint. It's meant to not dominate the character of the beach. So we've agreed that vending activity should be limited to the vending units provided in the vending zone and the units provided for water sport operators. Now, I did mention the fact that there's the potential for the smaller units to potentially be shared. So we do recognize the fact that there are some vendors who might just have a very small operation, not requiring a very big footprint, and may not need an entire 10 by 10 space. So we will be flexible in terms of the potential leasing agreements for those units to help smaller vendors be able to afford such spaces or be able to have a space that more fits their needs as opposed to necessarily having to lease a bigger space. And I should also highlight, perhaps while we're speaking about this, that the intention is that the government will invest in the development of these structures. They will be leased to persons under formalized lease agreements that would have terms and conditions that lessees have to abide by. And they would be leased for set periods of time that could be renewed so long as there's the continued desire by the lessee, and the lessee is respecting the various terms and conditions of the lease, etc. So I don't want persons to get the impression that these opportunities are locked in forever. These spaces could potentially go through different cycles of persons operating in them over time as the dynamics and the demand and circumstances change. We will, of course, be monitoring the plan. So there is some room potentially over time based on how implementation goes, based on management capacity, based on usage of the space, to think about perhaps creating additional opportunities within the vending space. So at the moment, if I go back to the spatial plan, there is about a 15-foot or so spacing between these units. So we wouldn't want to expand necessarily the footprint again because we're focusing on protecting the environment. But perhaps there might be opportunities in the future to think about filling in this space a bit with some other small vendors being able to operate within these areas. So this is a starting point. We'll be monitoring the implementation, the success. Part of what we intend to do actually is to repeat the same survey that we did to help inform the development of this plan, to repeat that survey at various intervals once the plan has been rolled out, so we can actually measure our success in terms of enhancing the visitor experience and enjoyment, and also develop a survey that would actually target tourists visiting the beach, so we can measure the success of the plan in terms of actually creating a space that tourists are enjoying. So the immediate answer is no, in terms of persons being able to do it in a sort of unregulated space, but the possibility that maybe the opportunities might open up over time as we monitor the success and implementation of the plan.
Okay, we have a few more comments and questions, Angela, so I'll try to get to them quickly. So,
Sure.
All right. So we have a question again from Sue Sarantino. She said, there's a huge development dedicated to tourists and their needs. I think consideration of the residents who like to gather together and share food and social interactions, there needs to be more space allocated to them, more barbecue areas, etc. Could this be considered? I think it's one of the questions I asked you earlier, Angela. Where do those people go? So I don't know if she was online or listening when I asked that question, but
so that's the intention of this picnic zone here, to accommodate all of that sort of activity that
Yes.
the person is referring to. Yes. Again, the barbecue pits, we're intending to start with 2 pits. And again, this is something that we might potentially adjust over time. We have to consider the management capacity that is there to manage the beach. We also have to consider the fact that each use has an impact, and we want to make sure that we don't unduly impact other users, including by the odors and so forth that are generated from these activities, and also the potential noise that could be associated with these types of activities. So we want to start at a level that we feel is manageable and that is balanced. And again, as we monitor how the plan is being implemented, there might be room to then further consider adding on to or expanding certain facilities. There might be the room, for example, to increase the number of picnic tables within the picnic zone, to extend it and make it a bit wider going into the Dune system. We try to focus it along the sea grape tree line in terms of what makes sense from a shading perspective. Also, persons likely wanting to just be closer to the seashore as opposed to back into the dune, etc. And also, I should indicate, just so it's clear, this outdoor eating area is not in any way meant to be exclusive to tourists. It's an area attached to the vending zone, and the vending zone and the services of that zone would be for tourists and residents alike. So this is also a space that residents would be able to enjoy.
Okay, let's get to these other questions, Angie. It says there, is this overall plan self-monitoring? Are we expecting people to change their habits and stop littering, to play their music at a lower level, volume, etc.? I feel sometimes you're wasting police resources when we need them to monitor. Will government have any sort of monitoring system set up, and perhaps a suggestion of having some type of beach warden could also create the new jobs, lifeguards on the land? That's one.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I guess it's more of a comment, but also asked, creating the jobs of beach wardens. We do have beach wardens on that particular beach, and it is a good question. I think with the management plan, it now gives us a option of having the beach wardens task widen a bit, and not only people typically look at the beach wardens as, they're the ones who go out on the beach and they clean up the beach. But now having a management plan on Beef Island, we can now have a broader range of activities and duties that an actual warden does. So there won't only actually be a beach warden, there'll actually be wardens within the management plan. So it's definitely something that we thought about and we're considering.
Yeah. Thank you for that, Marvin. And in addition, I would add that there's a certain level of civic and social responsibility that the ministry wants to encourage here. If this is a beach that we all want to use and enjoy, I think everybody has to take a level of responsibility in monitoring and policing their own actions, but also, a level of sort of self or community enforcement. So that's part of the rationale for us making sure that there's signage at the beach, which will clearly state the rules of the beach, so that persons have a source of authority to be able to speak to a neighbor who might be doing something against the rules and say, hey, these are the rules of the beach. Those signs will also include contact information for the authorities, including the police, that can be reached out to in cases that might require that level of intervention. But it's a beach, the government is not going to be able to be present 24/7, and in particular on the weekends when the beach is in heaviest use. So there will have to be a level of community participation and partnership in managing the beach. I mean, the dynamics and the behaviors that have evolved at Long Bay are very recent if we consider the history of the beach. This beach has traditionally been used by the community of East Ends and Long Loop, which of course are the second largest communities in the territory, without conflict between users, with a level of respect by other users of the beach. And I think that is something that is still attainable. It will take a level of education and encouraging to see that type of behavior change. But like I said, there are some aspects just built into the spatial plan itself, including this cutting out the access by vehicles, that should go a long way to help to curb some of the noise pollution issues. So a lot of that is generated from people coming with their loudspeakers in their cars and parking right up against the seashore, as well as being able to bring big coolers and so forth of things onto the beach. So we're hoping the combination of things helps to.
Sorry to disturb you, Angie. I have a couple more comments before we need to wrap up. So I'm just trying to get to everyone's comment before we get there. So quickly, it says, are the property owners on the west end of the beach allowed to block access to the entry with a gate? Is this legal? People often drive to the west end of the bay. Will parking be allowed to continue on the west end of the bay? Very quickly.
Yeah, that's a good question. So legally, and this is embedded in the Physical Planning Act of 2004, there is one public access required to each beach. Currently, Long Bay has two. There have been instances in the past, this is a private estate road that the person is referring to. There have been instances in the past where the access point around here has been chained off for extended periods of time. And that's perfectly legal because there's still a public access to a motorable public access to the beach maintained through this central access point. For many years now, this access point has been left open and people have been able to come and park. We would hope at the ministry that would continue. But I think part of that is making sure that the usage of the beach doesn't conflict with the community surrounding this area, because there is a residential community in this area, and part of that goes to the issue of the noise pollution. So yes, there's nothing illegal with persons blocking access to what is a private road and to private property.
Okay.
In this case where there's still another public access.
All right, quickly, let me get to these last few comments and questions for you. How many of the current tree or shrubbery will be removed to accommodate the vending spaces? You remember that one?
Mm-hmm.
and the red area. So we can go back to the red area there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And someone said, it's just a comment, fencing may be necessary at the back of the bathroom facility to stop persons from using that area as an alternative waste area. It is developing into a sanitary problem. And
At the back of the restroom facility?
Right now, I guess apparently in the back of the restroom facility, people is using it as it says that fencing may be necessary at the back of the bathroom facility, current bathroom facility. So thank you, Ms. Hill. That's something we're going to look into and see if we can stop that. So okay. Angela, I think I'm going to let you answer about how much of the shrubbery is going to be destroyed for that. And then we're going to have it's closed off after one more question after that. So very quickly respond to that person. Then we're going to wrap things up.
Yes, thank you. That's a very good question. We took a lot of care in determining where the footprint of this spending zone should be. And part of that was trying to minimize environmental impact. So the zone here, we've gone out and we've walked this beach extensively, including this footprint. This is now primarily dominated by what we call second growth vegetation. So this is not currently the native original vegetation that was there. It's vegetation that has regrown since the original clearing that took place. And for the most part, this is covered by neem trees, which are actually invasive species that we would want to eliminate from the beach environment, as well as other bush, if I can put it in that category, that is really not native to the beach and is not serving a real ecological or environmental function that we would care about preserving. So while we would be removing vegetation, it is really not the original vegetation to the beach dune, and this will definitely be offset by our restoration efforts at the beach.
Okay, and
so that was the first, and the second was the bathroom, the garbage behind the bathroom. Yes, we will certainly look into that further. I should just take the opportunity to highlight the fact that we do intend to shift the location of what is servicing as the main garbage bin for the beach, which is currently not well located at the central access. And we're seeking to actually locate that in the area behind the restroom facility. So it might create an opportunity for that waste problem to just be better managed. That seems to be happening in that area.
Thank you. And just as a FYI, I got a question. Just as FYI for the planners, BVI Water Sports uses the beach as a destination for local BVI children water sport program during the holidays, so that children can visit there and use kayak once a week. We don't see that being a problem of still going on. They can access through the main entrance or drive along up by to the eastern end and still have access for the kayak. So we do continue to have, or we do intend for stuff like that to continue.
Definitely.
Okay. With that said, Angie and the rest of the team, and obviously for all the questions that we've had tonight, we here at the Ministry of Natural Resources and Labor would like to thank you for all your comments. As you can see that we've put quite together a wonderful plan. So Angie, I'll give you 1 minute to say anything else, and then I'll turn it back over to the PS to give a closing. And I want to remind listeners that we do have a physical meeting on Thursday. I'm sure you're going to mention that too, or the PS is going to mention that.
Yeah, thank you very much, Mr. Hastings. I just want to thank the persons who have come out this evening from the community to participate in this process. As a trained planner, I really believe in the public consultation process and the value that it brings and the importance of discussing plans for a community with the community. So we do value the feedback. We have really tried hard to accommodate and balance all interests, all public interest in this space, while in keeping with our mandate at the ministry, making sure that the environment is protected. So we do hope that we've accomplished that and that the plan is one that everybody can buy into and be satisfied with. And we've really tried to make sure that identity of it remaining primarily a residential use for residential use and enjoyment while balancing commercial tourism activity has been struck. So with that, I thank you again, and I'll turn it over to Permanent Secretary, Mr. Smith Abbott, to close out the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Burnett. And for an excellent presentation and for fielding those questions, and to Deputy Secretary Hastings for so ably moderating the questions that arose as well as the comments. I would like to also acknowledge and thank the Honorable Premier, the Honorable Minister for Natural Resources, and the Honorable Minister for Health and Social Development for joining us this evening. For members of our team, Ms. Barlek for moving the opening prayer at the beginning of the meeting. And for all of you who have joined us either through Facebook, WebEx, or who may be listening, we also do thank you for joining us. Please do join us later this week, as Ms. Burnett would have mentioned. We will have a meeting physically at the Eastern Methodist Church at 6:30, I believe it is, that we will be there. And we anticipate having a robust and equally engaging dialogue about the plan. I hope that you have appreciated the length and breadth of the work that has gone in, and it has very significant meaning to us because we are seeing this particular plan as the leading edge, the sharp edge of many other plans to come and other planning exercises along other beaches. Just so that you know, the plan is available again on government's website. If you go to bvi.gov.bg/environment, you will see the link to the plan as well as to the beach use plan. So those plans are available online. And you can send any additional comments to nrl@gov.bg. So with that said, I would like to thank everyone again for joining us this evening, and I do wish you the very best. Thank you.